Okay, so here's a little video to help get you going on your desktop images that you're going to be making using your custom brushes and the brushes we got from Brush Easy. So just as a review, so far we should have our brush examples. We made 10 brushes from pictures. Those were all custom brushes. You've been to Brush Easy and you've downloaded at least 10 brushes and installed those. So now we're going to make a desktop image. And you can see here's one that I started. I've been playing with a little bit so far. I'm going to start a new one here with you so you can get the sizes correct. We're going to go to File and New. We're going to name it with your block number. So for example, 1, your last name, and desktop. 1 or 2. We're going to be making 2 desktops, one for you, maybe one for a friend, or maybe one for this computer, one for your MacBook. Both of them will be the same size. So we'll need to put desktop 1 if this is your first one. The width is going to be 1680. And this is important that it says pixels, not inches. So if it's pixels, that'll give it the correct size. And then a height of 1050, resolution of 72. And then we'll press OK. That gets us our new desktop image. We're also going to talk about how to create new layers. So we'll need to do that right away so that we can play with different things on different layers. We can do that one of 2 ways. We can go to the Layer drop-down menu and choose New Layer. Or down here in the lower right-hand corner of your screen on your layer stack, we have a little icon that looks like a square with a corner folded up. That's your new layer icon. And if you click that, you're going to get layers. Let's go ahead and add 2 or 3 new layers. On your first new layer, we'll change that name to Fill Color. Okay, a new tool for you to use. We're going to be using the Paint Bucket tool. It shares space with a gradient tool, which we'll use in a moment. So the Paint Bucket tool, select that. And that will allow you to fill an area quickly with color. And it's kind of like the magic wand. It looks for areas that are alike in color. So, for example, there's nothing on my current layer. When I click, it fills that area with whatever foreground color I have, in this case black. Okay, so Fill Bucket. Let me talk about the gradient tool as well. So the gradient color shifts between colors, and it does so gradually. Right now you can see what it'll do with my background and foreground colors. Right now it's black to white, but I can go ahead and pick some other colors here. So I'll pick a new foreground and a new background color. Okay, so now it's going to go from this purple to orange color. And to use this tool, I'm going to click, drag, and release. Okay, and so we can see it gradually shifts from one color to the other. We have different patterns that the gradient can go in, and direction, the way you move your mouse does matter. So you can change into different patterns through these little icons up here. So kind of play around with those for a little bit. And find one that you kind of like. I kind of like that. That looks pretty. Okay. Now, I'm going to use this color and my fill color layer. Oh, forgot to name that gradient. To make some pretty neat effects with brushes. Okay, so I'm going to take my fill color and drag it up above my gradient. Then I'm going to use my eraser. Maybe we recall the other day we talked about how the eraser could be used just like you can with your brushes. You can pick a shape to erase in. Okay, so if I've got a shape I really like, Oh, that's really big. I'm gonna make that smaller. Somewhere in between here. There we go. Okay, so I can use my eraser like a brush. Change my layer order. So now I've got my black layer as the active layer, and when I erase, I get a really cool effect because it's erasing the black and revealing the gradient underneath. So I could do that a few times and make a pretty cool looking image without too much effort. Okay, so there's using the eraser and pairing that with a fill color and a gradient. Now some other neat stuff that we can do with our brush. I'll switch to my brush tool. Right now I've got this great little hippo brush that I made the other day, but I want to do some interesting things with it. Now yesterday, or the day before, we were just stamping our brushes, and if we paint a line with our brush, we get pretty much just this smear of our brush shapes. Okay, can't really even tell that it is a hippo anymore. Okay, I'll undo that, Command Z. But if we open up our brushes palette, I can get to that through Window and Brushes, or if I've opened it before, it just becomes this little brush icon that I can tuck away or bring out. And there's some things that I can do. This is kind of like my layer style palette, because I can turn things off and on with these little check marks, and then I can also adjust them if I click on the actual words. So for example, shape dynamics, we have these little sliders we can play with, and it will preview the change down here at the bottom. So size jitter. Jitter is a change or like a movement, and it looks like it's changing the size here. Angle jitter is kind of cool. If I turn that on, my hippos will face different directions, not all in line. Scattering is another cool effect. If I turn on scattering, you can see it takes them from a direct line and it spreads them out away from my mouse path a little. And the count, I can adjust it so a lot or just a little come out, or that it changes as I am dragging. So I'm going to turn on the shape dynamics and scattering now, and I'm going to try to paint my hippos now. I'll change my color to something obnoxious. And notice I also moved up to my third new layer, and I'll name that Brushes. So that if I don't like what happens here on this layer, I can easily just delete it, and I don't have to mess up these other two layers that I do like. Okay, so now with my hippo, you can see I'm just dragging across, but I'm getting lots of great little hippos all over the place. The scattering and the shape dynamics are doing that for me. Okay, and then if I don't like one of these particular hippos, I could also take my eraser, maybe move to just a regular old eraser here. And since it's on a layer by itself, I can erase that and it doesn't mess up my background either. Okay, so there's two good reasons why we should probably put your brushes on a separate layer from other stuff. Alright, so some other things that I can turn on. Oh, I gotta move back to my brush tool. Textures. Textures, I can input a texture that Photoshop has over top of my brush. You can see those kind of have a little bit of a subtle effect or kind of a crazy effect, more like a sponge paint. So I could mess with textures. Dual brush, meaning I can make another shape inside my current brush, so now my hippos have sparkles inside of them as well. Color dynamics, really neat to mess with. Hue jitter, basically it's going to change between colors, foreground and background jitter. saturation jitter, brightness jitter. So I've turned on some of those things. You can see now I'm getting all kinds of colors of hippos, not just whatever was in my foreground color. Other dynamics, so making some of my hippos more or less opaque or kind of faded out a little with flow and opacity. And there's some other things I can turn on, like noise that adds like a static effect, wet edges, makes the edges around the edge of the hippo much darker. Airbrushing, basically it's like a spray can effect. I can hold down the mouse button and instead of just one coming out, a ton will come out. And some other things you can try. May have more or less effect depending on your brush. So there's the brushes palette. Again, you can find it window and brushes. And then once you've opened it, it looks like this little guy over here. Okay, and just a word, you can mess with your eraser also in the brushes palette. Okay, so don't forget that. Just as if you wanted to erase in this leaf shape, you can do that. Shape dynamics, scattering, all those things except for your color dynamics. Color dynamics won't work with the eraser since it doesn't have color. So there's a few things that you can try out with your desktop image. Remember, we're making two. The tools again that you're going to be using, you're going to use your erasers, you're going to use your gradient tool, your paint bucket tool, and of course your paintbrush. And I would recommend again that you add layers, new layers, to put your different elements on. And again, your new layer icon looks like this little guy down here in the lower right corner, or you can go up to layer and new layer. All right, thanks a lot everybody. Hope that was helpful.